Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 53 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, and today's episode is on the top personality types that are the most resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this episode I really enjoy and hopefully you will too. I definitely learnt a lot. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're going to be reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and as always there's some pretty interesting articles. So the first one is, adults put off crucial conversations about race because they mistakenly think young children won't understand. And this I completely understand, because before I read this, I didn't think children would understand either. And as always, I don't really read these beforehand, so let's see. So, conversations about race are not always easy, as the writer Ndi Endo Lodge has recently explored in her brilliant book Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. But they're no less necessary for it. Not talking about racism is simply not an option, particularly for those of us who benefit from structural inequality. We all have a part to play in ongoing dialogue, including parents of children growing up in a race full of racial injustice. Previous research has shown that constructive conversation about race and ethnicity can have positive outcomes for children of all races, increased empathy, an ability to learn about and accept different perspectives, a better understanding of their own identity, and less racial bias. But a new study suggests those critical conversations being delayed was parents are misjudging their child's ability to perceive and understand race. So this I think is really, really interesting, because I know a lot of you listeners don't have children, but I still think this is really important, because some of you might have younger siblings, nieces and nephews, some of you might be parents, some of you, I don't know, to be honest. Basically, but we all could be experienced to younger children at the end, and whether we're looking after them, whether they're our own or friends. And I think that this highlights the importance that, yes, that we might feel that we shouldn't have these conversations because they're too young, but I think that it's worth just at least mentioning it, just so they have a awareness. So for example, I'm going to talk about this in the personal update. I mention a social inequalities polite perspective, and I quite frankly say, yes, we might not experience all of this. I forget the exact thing, but it was something along the lines of, is that yes, this all might seem a bit much in this chapter, even though that's complete mistaken, but we need to have an awareness of these things. So I think that really does apply to children. That's just something to think about. Oh yeah, this should be interesting. So cognitive control helps cheaters to stay honest, and honest people to cheat. Oh wow, this should be interesting. So many of us are faced with daily temptations to cheat. You might be offered the chance to download pirated music perhaps, or books. Quite frankly, I'm not talking as an author, I'm talking as a reader. If you do, I haven't experienced this, but other people have. You're very highly downloading a virus, so just be careful. Or you might wonder about passing your child off as young as they are, or to avoid buying them on a ticket on public transport. And yes, we've all done that. So, as authors of a new paper point out, several lines of research propose that cognitive control is needed for us to resolve the conflict between wanting to cheat and wanting to be honest. We need, in other words, to make an effort to rein in our impulses. However, the new work shows that this means different things to different people. If you're typically honest, cognitive controls can turn you into a cheat, which I think is really, really interesting. So I had a quick look at this earlier, and it does make really interesting reading, and it just shows that cognitive techniques and cognitive psychology can have massive real-world impacts. And as we do one more, and it turns out there is only one more. So our ability to perceive music or beats become more refined through childhood. This actually should be interesting. If you were to play your favourite song right now, I imagine you'll have little difficulty clapping along to the beat. Our appreciation of beat allows us to clap, dance, march, sway in time with a piece of music or just with each other. As the authors of a new paper published in Journal of Experimental Psychology, General points out these behaviours occur simultaneously across human cultures, but whilst moving to the beat seems effortless, it involves all kinds of perceptual processes. The team reports that our ability to perceive beats becomes ever more refined and also nuanced through childhood and adolescence. This may seem like an instinctive ability, but it is learned, and the training must make it. And training does make it better. So this I think is really interesting, not because of the whole music thing, but I think it goes to show that we take a lot for granted as a human beings in terms of our behaviour, and it just goes to show that a lot of what we do is learned. So I think that's really, really interesting. So that's enough of the psychology news section, so let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. I promise you this personal update will not be as long as last week's. Last week I mentioned about the prescription rights talk that I'm attending on Thursday the 1st of October 2020. Problem with that, I got an email from the British Psychological Society telling me that because such a passionate argument would take a lot of preparation, even though this was a week and a half before the thingy, none of our panellists could actually prepare in a timer, so they're now going to do a Q&A. So I'm still going to go to the Q&A because there might be enough content, but I highly doubt there'll be enough a prescription rights episode of the Psychology World podcast, so sorry about that if you were looking forward to it, but I will still report on it, so it will probably be an extended version of the personal update perhaps. So there's that. I'm a bit disappointed, but hell, it should still be interesting. So another really interesting thing is, the formulation book is done and it's now available on pre-order like it was last week, I just remembered. This week I finished writing it, I proofread it, edited it, then I submitted it to a proper editor and a proofreader, so it's now available, and also I formatted it and everything. So it's now, so the ebook is now available on all the usual places as a pre-order, like Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, and all the other ones. I really enjoyed the book because it came to about 20,000 words, which I was just a bit surprised at. And as I was doing the speech, the text-to-speech, listening to it, I was quite shocked because it's so full of information, even though it's really explained really easily, so I really like it. So, plus it's done at the discounted pre-order price of $2.99, but it will increase. I've not quite decided on the full price yet. It's either going to be $4.99 or $5.99. I'm leaning towards the $5.99 because I think it's really, really useful. Yes, you've got that to think about. Yes, that, and the clinical psychology book is now available on Thursday the 1st of October. Yes, the week that this goes out, my clinical psychology book will be available. Yes, and the price of that will increase to $4.99 on Thursday the 1st of October. Yes, and that's available on all the usual ebook retailers, and the paperback will also be available for the release date. Hopefully, it should be. And then the last interesting thing that I wanted to mention is that my Kickstarter funded. So you probably remember 2 episodes ago. Yeah, about 2-3 episodes again, because episode 3 was the Psychology of Coats one. But I mentioned that I was doing a Kickstarter, which is crowdfunding campaign, and I'm so excited that it funded. Yes, I managed to get £519 in total, which I think is brilliant. And if any of you backed it, thank you so much. The rewards, to be honest, by the time this goes out, the reward should already be with you if you did an ebook reward. And in terms of psychology, that is it for this week, mainly because the only other stuff I've been doing are from my fiction brand, so I've been writing some short stories, and then next week I'm focusing on my Books for Writers brand, because I'm going to be starting a new podcast, like I said last week, so I'm just going to be starting to dabble in that. Or, actually no, so I did want to mention is a great reading recommendation that I want to give for people specifically doing business psychology, but I think anyone interested in business and psychology should definitely listen to Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. I listened to it as an audiobook and it's really good because so much of it is it's about human behaviour and how to manoeuvre your business around it and how to become oversubscribed. So you've got more people wanting your company than you can actually give them, which is every business owner's dream, pretty much. Yes, that's really useful if you're interested in business psychology, because it's just because it's not a psychology book. I just think it's really interesting to see how people behave and how to get people excited, and just basically tips and tricks to make people show certain behaviours. And today's episode has been sponsored by my health psychology book, available on all of the usual e-book platforms like Google Play, Apple Books, Kobo, Barnes & Noble and Amazon and the print and large print books are available on Amazon. So here's the blurb. So do you want to know what causes obesity? Are you interested in health psychology, or do you just want to learn about psychology and humans in general? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, then this is the book for you, as together we explore the amazing world of health psychology and investigate how biological, cognitive and many more interesting factors influence our health behaviour in an engaging conversational tone. By the end of this book, not only will you start to become an expert in health psychology, but you will start your journey to understand human behaviour and learn about yourself as well. And there's also a audiobook edition available on Audible and all the major audiobook retailers, and you can get the ebook and the audiobook for free at your local library. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So, moving on to the content part of today's episode. So, we're going to be talking about the different types of personalities that tend to be very resilient to the COVID-19 pandemic. This I actually found quite interesting because there's been a lot of different ideas about what different people could be most devastated by the pandemic. For example, it was thought that extroverts would actually be quite devastated during the pandemic because they'd be cut off from social contact. But there's this thing in this study that I'm about to mention, but to be honest, I don't fully believe it, but it's something, and it is sort of evidence against that idea. And then there's also an idea that conscientious people would actually be quite affected by the pandemic because their structure and their routine would be pretty much decimated. So overall, there are there's a team of researchers at Pixplay that conducted a study during the 27th and 28th of August 2020 to see what are the most psychologically resilient personality types. And if you go onto connorwhiteley.net/blog and you can find this blog post and click on it, then you can see the original study. And of course, you can always leave a comment on the blog post. So the first personality type is emotional stability. So these type of people are very good at handling stress. And I like to think that I am, because as I've mentioned on the podcast before, I'm of the school of thought that stress isn't bad for you. It's it's your body's way of trying to help you. And I've also mentioned before about some studies that said that is only if you believe in if stress is bad for you, then it actually is. These types of people handle stress very well, and they don't tend to get nervous very easily. So these people do quite well in the pandemic because they aren't that stressed out about the whole pandemic. So that's the first one. Then you've got future positive people, and this is where I definitely come under. So these type of people are very goal-orientated and they're really hard-working. So this I actually quite like because they can channel their frustration into more productive endeavours, and I'm going to link back to this in a minute, but this is definitely where I come in because I've not been that frustrated or panicking during the pandemic much. It's only because of this second wave that's coming in the UK. I'm a bit about it all, but I haven't panicked during the pandemic, and that's because I think I've been diving into the author business, writing books, psychology, and all that basically. And then my mum's the same like basically, because she automatically wanted to be productive by helping my granddad and my aunt, so they didn't need to put their lives at risk. And that's the other personality type. Then the third one is past positive, and this I actually thought was a really interesting idea because I had no idea what past positive actually meant, because I don't know, it just sounds quite weird. I think future positive, I can understand. Past positive, it does sound like the result of a COVID test. Doesn't it? Okay, well, it's like these people are very reminiscent, they're very nostalgic about the past because they focus on remembering positive past events and the memories. For example, a nice family holiday, a nice trip to the beach when we could do that, or when the weather was a lot better in the case of the UK. It's just like stuff like that. And the reason why these tend to be quite effective at being resilient during the pandemic is because these enjoyable memories actually act as a protective buffer against the psychological distress of the pandemic. So the last one, this one's I'm not sure I believe in it, to be honest. So apparently extroverted people do really well during the pandemic. And yes, I can pretty much feel some of you rolling your eyes or tutting or pulling weird faces in shock. So apparently extroverted people do really well during the pandemic because despite them being cut off from social contact, which is where they get their energy and where they find enjoyable, compared to introverted people, they're more likely to experience happier emotions, and introverted people are more likely to feel lonely and decreased levels of happiness. Personally, I'm a bit, I can understand the logic, and the results in that experiment, but tons of writers are like introverts, and to be honest, I know quite a few of them are doing fine during the pandemic, But this, I believe, is because of the future positive idea, because we've all dived into creative work. So yes, like that's the 4 different personality types that are the most psychologically resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I would love to know, like, if you've been doing well during the pandemic, like which 4 of these personality traits that you think that you might have. So you can always email me at connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. Or you can tweet me on Twitter at Sci-Fi Wiley, or you can always leave a comment on the show notes. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.